All right. So today, the third and last section of Madame Bovary, right? Yeah, I told you guys that things would not end well, right? And that was probably an understatement. Right? She ends up committing suicide by poisoning herself, right? Ends up being this long, drawn out death, painful, agonizing death that she has. All right, Flabeau goes to great length to describe. He spends like 15 pages describing how much pain she was in before she died, right? And then, of course, what happens after with Charles learning about what she had been doing all this time. Of course, Charles dies of grief and leaves the poor little daughter without any money. She gets sent to her grandmother's. Then she gets sent to somebody else who's a peasant, right? So the little girl is going to be living a hard life after all this is over. Her two lovers, Leon and what was Rodolphe, right? Leon and Rodolphe. Both of them are just living life as normal, right? Rodolphe even kind of like shies away from confrontation when he's confronted by Charles. And Leon, their whole breakup angles and was going to be something interesting to talk about today, just because did he really have any choice with how things were going, right? She even asked him to steal money from his employer, right, to pay her. Yeah, so last couple of classes, we might have been able to feel a little bit of sympathy for Emma, right? This last part's where things start to really get out of control. Maybe, but she is still a victim of sorts, too. We can argue. I don't know. What do you guys think of Emma here? Did she just fully lose control? Was that her fault? Right, that all this money scheme just came crashing down on her. Right,
I mean, she definitely got fleeced by, how do you say it, Lebedeau or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
LaRue.
yeah. She definitely got fleeced by him, but I mean, she got fleeced by him because she was looking for money she could hide from her husband to live extravagantly while having an affair. So I can't really say she's well, I guess she is a victim, but I can't really feel any sympathy for her. I mean,
Right.
Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, she knows what she's getting herself in. She knows what LaRue does after a while, right? But she just keeps going back anyway to sort of feed the desire that she has. Well, I don't know who else. What other thoughts we have about Emma here? Sympathy for her or no? You're looking like you have no sympathy, Keegan. You just came up on this.
I really don't. I feel bad for the child that had to watch her drink the poison
Yeah,
because I feel more sympathy for that child than I do her. But she really didn't seem to feel much empathy for anyone, and
yeah. She never. You're exactly right. Right. She never seems to think about what her actions are going to do to anybody else. Right. She's just kind of so completely absorbed in herself. Right. Yeah, we talked last time about the daughter, right? The daughter who seems to be. Last time she hurt the daughter accidentally, right? But this time we literally have the daughter. The daughter is the victim here at the end, right? Want to be growing up childless or going to be growing up in poverty, right? Without parents.
Now, that was one thing I didn't understand there at the end. Like, They say she didn't go to Roll because he was paralyzed, but what in the hell does that even matter? This kid has been raised by the servants up until they went flat broke anyways. Why wouldn't they just send him to the guy who's actually got money to see her to her education and got land for her to live on, as opposed to sending her to, like, at the very end, like, small towns and whatnot, what LaRue did would have come out, almost certainly, and yet it never does. The kid gets sent to a peasant when there is a fairly well-off grandpa to go to. Sure, he's broken down, but who the hell isn't at that age in that time period? It's like he he kept, like the genre says, to realism right until the end when he decided to just really hammer it in. Yeah, everything bad will come to you if you don't stick to living well and whatnot. It's just, it just killed it for me, and it made me just so angry that he just went to these extremes right at the end.
Yeah, so you think he went to the extreme to be too sentimental with the ending then?
Like, I mean, we can all agree this dude wrote this with an agenda, right? He was trying to say, yeah, everyone who tries to, put on airs or has a nice house or whatnot, all these people who get money and do well that aren't just landed people who work their land every day, they'll come to a bad end. And the peasants, though, they're just terrible. They'll take and scratch at you like vultures. And the gentry are always out and about doing horrible things. But then at the very end, the guy who he would have been putting through for this entire setting up as being the only good person through this entire thing, Roald. Sure, he's paralyzed at the end, but also his granddaughter is sent off, not to him, but to some peasant who sells her to a cotton mill. What even was his point then, other than everything is terrible?
Yeah. Yeah, everything sucks, right? That's life. Yeah. Everything sucks.
And like that whole thing with Hame at the end, where it's positioning him as to try and be the villain of the story somehow. I mean, sure, yeah, the whole thing with the club-footedness was, it started with him, but he also goes to great lengths to say literally everyone in this village came up to this man and said, come on, do it for science, or what are you, scared, you chicken shit, and now somehow here at the very end, this guy who has been honestly the comic relief through most of this, that's your big villain.
Yeah, it's this sort of villainizing, right? This aristocracy, this bourgeoisie class in France, right? This middle class. He Pulbo tries to paint him like he's a big hypocrite. Right, he's doing everything he can for self-preservation, and he's not really even a good pharmacist, right? He doesn't have the fact that he didn't have a degree really came out in the end when he didn't know what to do to save Emma from poison.
I mean, she ate most of a jar of arsenic.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. Unless you immediately pump her stomach, she's dead. And she managed to get away and wait several hours before admitting to anyone she was poisoned. Nothing could have been done at that point. And he goes out of his way. Sure, he's saving his ass, but he's also saving the kid Justin's ass, because, if this came up, somebody would have said, well, that kid needs to be brought in front of a court or something. he sat there and let this woman commit suicide right in front of him. It's like he wrote a fairly decent novel, and he got to the end and he said, oh, wait, shit, I was trying to make a point with this, wasn't I? Well, and just hammered it in so hard at the very end, to the detriment of the rest of the story.
Yeah, in the second part, we got a lot of that sort of satire about the bourgeoisie class. Right, but this last part, we definitely sort of lost a little bit of that as we got sucked into Emma's affairs. Right, we kind of lost a little bit of that satire that he's trying to do. So Justin's right. I think he just kind of remember this angle of the story. Right, that we haven't touched on in 100 pages. It's kind of feels a little disingenuous.
He based it off of a actual woman who, if you look up the town Rye, it is actually near Rooney, or however you pronounce that. The woman did have an affair, did come from a farm family, well-to-do, and she killed herself with poison, and her husband died a year later, and they did have a daughter, and apparently he knew about it, and used a lot of her information for the story, because people from the town were like, yeah, you wrote about this woman.
Right, I actually didn't know that. That's interesting.
This is honestly just a transcription of a bunch of town gossip he heard once upon a time.
Pretty good.
He heard it from his dad. His dad was the actual doctor who went to go treat her.
Let me guess, the guy at the very end where they say, oh yeah, he was a man among men. All of his students wanted to emulate him down to the way he dressed. Never has there been such a generation of doctors as the one he came out of.
It's a glorification.
That's pretty much it.
I think you made Justin really love this book now.
I don't know.
Like there is a certain.
Or go ahead, Justin.
I was just gonna say, there's a certain point where I think we really should just start looking at literature and saying, yeah, this is important for history and it's a great museum piece. How good is it? Oh, it's terrible. It's the first frickin' novel. No, it's no good at all, but it is the first novel. Here it is on this pedestal. Don't worry about reading it. It's not that great, but it is here. Keep note of that.
Yeah, the novel's still well taught and remembered, mostly because of its psychological portraits, right, that it gives of Emma. Like other writers would later do it, right? We had writers like Henry James. Henry James is probably the most well-known American realist. But again, these great sort of creation of human beings that no other artists had done before with words. That's almost what LeBeau is mostly famous for.
So he's only really famous for being a good jumping off point.
Well, he's famous for his characters, right? That's the main thing. A lot of his other books aren't as well known as this one. This is the one that sort of, yeah, this is the one that's mostly he's remembered for.
Is it because of the relatability of the story? You know, even in the time frame that, you know, we're in, it's still pretty relatable. You can kind of maybe see someone, you know, or heard of an incident of that, you know.
I think it's probably part of it, right? Adultery is a theme as old as man, right? So, you know, it was scandalous then, right? It's still kind of risque now, even, right? You know, so that's, of course, this is often used too to, Justin says, as a history piece. Like this captures, you know, the spirit of that particular era of France really well too. That post-revolution, you know, France, as far as trying to get themselves back together after the revolution, getting life back to normal. So it's known for that too. It's a period piece. Yeah, adultery is universal, right? That's something that'll never not be talked about, I think.
Yeah, I gotta admit it is good at that, but as far as the satire of middle class goes, I think I'll stick with Great Expectations, you know.
Yeah, of course, Dickens always puts a nice happy ending on things, right? That's his style. He's a completely unlike Flabeau.
Yeah. Well, happy-ish as far as Great Expectation goes.
Right.
More bittersweet than anything for your main character. The best friend, though, gets a really nice ending. Does really well for himself.
Yeah, most of the time he tries to wrap up plots in as neat of a manner as he can, right? Like, think about like the Christmas Carol, right? Everything's wrapped up in a nice little bow at the end of it. They were writing about the same time, actually, Flabeau and Dickens, 1840s, 1850s. So maybe we can move on to some of the character analysis that we've started over the past couple of weeks. Let's start with Leon. All right, let's start with Leon since he comes back prominently. What do you guys make of Leon here? You know, do you think that he did Emma wrong? Do you think, or did he kind of spur this on longer than it should have? Was he too cowardly not to get out of it sooner than he did? Right? Or did she escalate things too out of control for him? How do y'all feel about what happens with Leon and their little affair? Do you think Leon's in the wrong here? You feel like he pushed it too much? Or did she push it too far with him?
I mean, discounting the cheating in the first place thing, about the only thing I could really hold against the guy is there at the very end when she's begging for money. He says, "Yeah, 3:00 tomorrow. You'll see me. I'll have the money. Don't you worry." That was kind of shit of him. You know, don't get her hopes up just to try and get her away from you so you can call the whole thing off. But other than that, and the initial fact that, well, it was cheating in the first place, he did all right as far as it went. He saw it was a sinking ship. He tried to get off. Didn't let her drag him into doing anything illegal.
Yeah, gotta respect him for that, right? He didn't rob from his employer.
Leon kind of exhibits that he's a decent person, like throughout. Like he talks about, he knows some of the things he's doing is wrong, and Madame Bovary kind of brings out the bad in him, and I think he simply just wanted to be with her, and until the end, he didn't realize like what he would have to do to be with her because she had all these false illusions of what it took to be in love, and it completely was just spiraling out of control. It was almost too late before he realized it, but
Yeah.
I mean, he even kept up with the whole prove your love to me, write me these poems, tell me all this sweet nothing, write me letters and all that. He was keeping up with that. He just couldn't keep up with her spending.
Yeah, she couldn't go to the Motel 6, right? She had to go to the Marriott each time, right?
I feel like Leon has this almost dramatic character shift when we meet him again, because he had this 3 years of us not knowing what happened, and all of a sudden here he is making the move. Because it's not her, it's him. But then when we left him, he was very much more shy and to himself. Now he's all for getting her to be with him. It's almost like his character arc kind of shifted, and it kind of surprised me. I figured she would have been the one to kind of push it. It was him, and I don't know if something happened within those 3 years that we just don't know, or if it's just an inaccurate representation from before.
Well, in those 3 years, he becomes a professional, right? He's no longer just an apprentice boy. So that probably gave him an air of confidence in some way. But you're exactly right. He's the one who pushes her this way, right? There's even that dramatic scene where they go to the church. She's like praying, like, "Don't let me cheat, God. Don't let me cheat." Right? And he's like, "Come on, let's go."
I mean, to be fair, the last time it kind of just broke her. I mean, was she a little bit dramatic about it? Yes. But it broke her. It left a scar. And so, she kind of promised herself that she wasn't going to do that. And then here he is not making matters worse, especially since they already had an emotional connection.
So if she wouldn't have reunited with him, right, maybe the story would have had a much different ending.
Oh, no, I feel like her personality was still kind of not good for her circumstances. So do I think she might have committed suicide? Probably not. But maybe would she cheat again? Maybe. She wasn't going to be happy either way. That was kind of something you had to learn, especially after her first affair. You just knew that she was never going to be happy.
Yeah, she needed Charles to conveniently die, right? Like Charles's first wife conveniently died at the beginning of the novel, right? Poor Charles. Yeah, you guys see.
I mean, honestly,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I honestly would have liked her more as a character if she'd come up with some scheme to get rid of him. Pretending some guy had raped her or done something to her, was trying to blackmail her, set Charles up to go duel the guy and get himself killed or something.
Yeah. I wonder why that didn't run through her mind, because we get to see her thinking a lot. I'm surprised it didn't go through her mind. I mean, running away went through her mind, and that's considered so taboo. I mean, every time we get a tragedy ending, there's almost always a suicide. Like Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, this. Pretty sure there's more others I just can't think of. But it's almost like the ending is always a continuous amount of people dying. Because it was Charles's father, and it was pretty much her, then him, and apparently his mother died. Because where else would the child have went? So, and we don't know what kind of conditions she had, because she had to go work at a factory, a child labor factory, and they usually died. So It was kind of out of nowhere, the ending. I agree. But a lot of authors, when they're writing, how do they end the story? They kill everybody. And in this time period, people are probably used to that type of endings. It's their plot twist. Because there's no true wrap up. Because that story to me doesn't have a true wrap up at the end. Because it's very much her not liking him liking her getting with other people, the end. Like, I don't know if there was any other way to really end the story. I mean, maybe for the child to have a better ending, but not necessarily her.
Ended right after she dies. I mean, we didn't need to see the funeral. We could have at least consoled ourselves. Well, maybe Charles went on and, you know, found a third wife, or maybe he found happiness after some way or other. You know, nothing it would have been set in hard stone as far as anyone's fate's gone. Or counterwise, maybe extend your give us one more chapter of what eventually became of the kid, as opposed to, yeah, she met with a terrible fate that a lot of terrible things could have happened to her through, but I'm going to end it right there.
Yeah, I think Madame Bovary, Emma, was just kind of destined to die in the end because of, I guess, her transgressions. Because it's very taboo, and it still kind of is today with that subject. And a lot of people would probably like to strangle an ex or two for it. But I felt sad for him because he didn't know until he found those letters that she kept. And he kind of took off his rose-colored glasses and realized, and he just died. I think that's more of a tragedy as well as the child. Her, I mean, I don't hate her. It's just, you could kind of see where she was going to end up.
Right. Yeah, the last chapter definitely amplifies that we should feel sorry for Charles thing too, right? Just because that is when he discovers it all. If he would have ended the chapter earlier, then she would have died, and he would have never known about the affairs, right? So
Yeah, she was his great love, but he wasn't hers.
yeah,
That was just kind of the saddest part of the story. Of course, besides the child being put into labor camp, because that's just utterly horrible. But emotionally, I think maybe that's the tragedy. Because, like, he loved her. He was affectionate towards her. And she just didn't feel the same way. She's almost emotionally lacking. She seems that way even with her other relationships.
I mean, don't forget the part where then right after she's died, as soon as the body's good and cooled, everybody and their brother in that village decides to get themselves a piece of this man who they already know who committed suicide over it, had driven them into the depths of debt, the likes of which in England probably would have seen him in debtor's prison. And they say, now's the time. Let's kick him while he's down. It's like, okay, we get it, man. Literally everyone in this story, except maybe Charles, is terrible. But Jesus H. Christ, we bought this to be entertained, man.
and nothing redeeming. Yeah, so go ahead.
I
I was gonna ask
he's
Justin
just-
something.
Go ahead.
What?
So do you feel that Charles has any blame in the actions that took place? You know, he's always working, he ain't picking up the signs. There was multiple occasions where you could have probably been scratching your head on it, and he just was oblivious to all of it.
I mean, the dude trusted his wife to really shove any blame for any of this on him is pretty much just victim blaming.
Right.
I mean,
I just noticed, there was a few situations where, I just feel like you go back to the small town thing. You're going to know how Rodolph is, in a small town. You're going to have heard how he acts and, carries on with women. And then you're, forcefully just like, yeah, right off with him, have a good time. If you're going to the small town, stature and theory, I live in a small town. I'm sure you guys, small towns all over West Virginia. You kind of know the guys that are maybe the players or kind of get around, and the women, the same thing. So knowing that aspect, I feel like there may be some little bit of it, your little negligence on your part to not maybe put a little more upkeep in your relationship rather than your work. Rodolph even states that, his fingernails are dirty. He's constantly working. He's never around. She's bored, so.
well, that's the thing though. Like, if I remember right, around the time he comes into the story, he'd only owned that big chateau for like 3-6 months, something like that. Before that, his last woman had been some Parisian actress chick that he'd just been sugar daddying along. And honestly, pretty much everybody did figure it out eventually, and not one of them ever thought to mention to him. But he was basically a predator who just happened to be new in the neighborhood, and after the first time and how bad that could have gone, he just eventually decided not to, shit where he eats as far as that goes.
Yeah, his naiveness kind of really hurt him more than anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would consider it trust, but more of being naive because of all the things that went down. Because, like in the beginning when she was with Leon, not as an affair, but necessarily talking, he should have known because they would spend the entire time together. They would laugh, they would read. They had a bond, but here he is just playing games with another person. And I bet she was probably the person in the relationship that didn't want to leave the knot. And okay,
Well,
but
that's the thing. I mean,
I don't know.
that was the thing. It wasn't just her and Leon. It was her, Leon, him, some of Homais, and I think maybe his wife there. They were just friends all getting along. Like, the guy didn't have a jealous bone in his body. He didn't, think, I bet my wife is cheating on me even once. He loved her and he trusted her. I mean, in any other setting, in any other story, this is the guy people would have been holding up as this is what you want out of a husband, people.
Yeah.
He trusts his wife. He believes in her. He doesn't have a jealous bone in his body. Sure, she might have male friends, but he has absolute confidence in her virtue and in the strength of their marriage. Anything she wants, he's more than willing to work to get it for her. Like, he's honestly one of the best people I think I've ever read of in a story. And then it turns around. Hey, she actually did cheat on you. You should have been more like everyone else, bitter and mistrustful and whatnot.
I think it might be a little healthy to be somewhat suspicious because at that time, I don't think women had many male friends. It was more of a female group or a circle, and she was the only person that she really got along with was Leon. But there's other circumstances that raise question, like when his mother would come to town, it was almost like his mother would run the show. And like the time that she suggested that his wife shouldn't read, he takes all away her books. And I mean, there's a few like instances, but I don't necessarily think he played a big part, but I think his naiveness was his fault, like a fault of his in this whole in their relationship, at least.
Could he have added a little more romance to the relationship? Some
I
candle
don't think she would
dinner.
have accepted it.
I mean, is there anybody anywhere who's going to say, "Oh yeah, my mother-in-law. I love it when she comes to stay for 3-4 weeks at a time."
No, I mean, but she kind of ran the show. And I understand that to a point, but
But that's the thing. She came in and had opinions, which is fairly standard at around that age bracket. But the instance
you
you're
can,
talking about, he didn't take her novels away. I think at worst, they ended up canceling the subscription to a library she had. But they renewed it later on because they came up asking him for a bill about it. Like, the most they ever did was just token things to placate his mother because, all right, name me one family around here. Anyone, show of hands. Who hasn't done that? Who hasn't done a meaningless little gesture to placate somebody in their 60s?
yeah,
Is you
I
gonna
mean,
say something, Emily?
I don't know.
Oh, earlier, she said that he was naive, but then again, I think partially he was naive, but I think partially he was to the point to where he would let her do anything if she would show some sort of affection. Like if that meant talking to these other men, so well be it. But because I mean, that part of him had to have known. I mean, I don't think he was a stupid man. Maybe partially, like he was a little naive, but I don't think he was really stupid. I think he was to the point to where he would have done anything at all to even see her happy or show him any little bit of affection.
Yeah, I mean, I get that because there's some instances where it's just like, because to me he's very much more book smart than common sense smart in that sense, because a lot of people can't have both, and I feel like he was more book smart because of his career and things that he done, so I can see that.
Here's a question for you. Do you think that she would have respected him more if he would have started putting his foot down about this kind of stuff? Like, no, you're not going to go for music lessons. A lot of money, like, because there's lots of passages in
It's
the
hard to tell. I mean,
Yeah, I feel like she probably wouldn't have,
sorry.
like, because in the beginning she kind of didn't respect him that much.
The only reason why I asked the question is there's lots of passages where she sees him. It's like he's such a weak man, right? He doesn't really, like when he's grieving over his dead father, right? There's even a passage there like he's such a weak man. How dare he grieve? He needs to be more manly. Right? So,
Yeah, but I feel like she's the woman that only sees extremes. So if he put his foot down one time, he's going to be this big bully. But if he cowers back another time, he's this weak man. I don't think there's no in between with her thought process.
Yeah, the second he put his foot down, he'd immediately just become the villain in any romance novel he read.
yeah.
I mean, maybe early on in their relationship, if they established some respect, maybe it could have had a slightly different outcome. But I think her mind was made up after their honeymoon period.
Yeah. And early on, like the way it describes the way he looks at her, like in the way that he feels about her, is almost like reading one of these mushy gushy romantic novels that she just loves, and she's too dumb to even realize that if she has it right there, if she would just say what she wanted, opposed to just being petty and just expecting he knew how to treat her.
Yeah, I feel like
And I mean, he was already giving her plenty of affection.
I feel like their problem in their marriage is thinking that they can read each other's minds, in a sense, because she wants this big old grand thing, and he's thinking of this big old grand thing, but she can't see it. She can't read his mind, and he can't read hers, and I think that's played a big part of their disconnect.
I was going to
I
add
mean,
family on that. I agree. Like the early stages of how he pursued her would have been, early in indications that he knew, or kind of seeing how you could see how adultery begins, in that aspect, because he wasn't supposed to come back, but he was there every day, and he obviously had a fondness for her. So doing that to his first wife, that's why I would reiterate, how is he that naive if he's kind of the beginning of all that,
Yeah.
some aspects you could see that, that's all I'm getting at, is why I would look at maybe he's a little too naive, more so than he probably should, considering look what he did to his wife, and she had to, basically dictate everything. So
Yeah.
you see why he probably wouldn't want to flip that script either. He wouldn't want to become that guy.
Yeah. When I read the first part, I automatically thought that he and his first wife just switched roles when he married Emma, because apparently his first wife actually loved him, and he was kind of like, oh, she actually loved me. I don't know. I mean, Emma, like, she even states that she thinks certain people love her. So I don't. Woman's kind of nuts, in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember the passage early on when his first wife dies. He's like, "Oh, I guess I feel a little sad about that.
Yeah.
You liked me."
And he saw his like grieving period as more of a hindrance once he kind of started to pursue Emma. And then I was kind of like, I feel sorry for his first wife. I mean, we don't really know that much about his first wife, though.
yeah, we know pretty much all we need to know. It was a business match. She had put out and falsified the details about her estate while searching for a husband to come in and, I guess, manage it and, still keep the money flowing in
Yeah.
for things to keep going. Like, he might have said, sure, he said, oh, she must have loved me in the end, but honestly, she was probably just gripped with mortal terror that he was going to divorce her or beat her or something for lying about the resources she had.
Yeah, I mean, in their relationship, it's also stated that she wanted him to be more affectionate towards her as well. I mean, the only thing we know about her is that she's a widow and that she's older than Charles, really, and that his mother set it up, and he really didn't have no say in it. So, I don't know.
Here's another question for you guys. Would Emma, let's say that this story was set currently in our contemporary times, right? There's not really such thing as a marriage economy anymore, right? Where you marry just to get rid of a daughter, right? And get wealth in the exchange and all that. Marriage today is more about love than economics. Maybe not all the time. There's definitely some economic marriages, right? But more so today, it's different. And Emma, of course, maybe in this day and age, she wouldn't have married Charles, right? Do you think Emma would have been happier had she lived in a different time?
I think she'd have got things paid for a little bit easier for sure. There'd be a lot more people willing to just pay, handle that bill maybe for a little bit of crazy time. I don't know. More money.
She probably would have got more consequences as well. Because nowadays, if someone cheats on you, you kind of have to really watch out. Because you don't know what we're capable of doing. Because of social media, and then that Karen Underwood song about tearing up his vehicle. But I feel like she wouldn't have changed much, because she still saw Charles as an escape of something more grand. not necessarily because she loved him.
I don't know. She probably would have done pretty well today. I mean, multiple people, even when she's starting to get a bit older, keep going on about how beautiful she is. She could have been an Instagram model or a cam girl, gotten plenty of money to, go and actually see stuff, do things. And nowadays, the idea of just jumping from one whirlwind romance to the other, while not exactly thought of as a great thing to do, it also isn't, the sort of thing that gets you drug out into the town square and stoned to death.
I feel like she probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have necessarily dated more, because I feel like that's what she wanted more.
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, and then too, if she hadn't been in a convent as a young child, like, it makes me think, would she be yearning for more if she had been eased into more of?
Yeah. I mean, when she was in the convent, it was that one person that would come every so often that had these romance books and stuff. So, like, if she was to be here today, she probably wouldn't have been as sheltered. Like, if she went to a public school or something.
If she'd actually been, raised by her parents, crazy
Yeah.
idea, I know, she might have actually said, oh, that's what love after, the first whirlwind bit looks like.
Yeah.
And actually gained an appreciation for it instead of only ever having experience with love as those first couple crazy whirlwind months and then nothing else.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's a thing they still debate today. Is the idea, having romance movies always be about people meeting and getting together really a good thing for people in the long run?
Yeah. I think it probably would have had a more positive effect on her, at least being raised and kind of counteracting with her thought process, at least what it is in the book. Because we could dissect so much into how she was raised, into her personality and the way she thinks. So, like, if she was in a public school or even just like a Catholic school in general, because that's their religion at the time, it would have been more. It wouldn't have been as sheltered, because I feel like the convent was probably more sheltered, and she saw that woman that came every so often with romance books as an escape to her reality.
Yeah, going along with what Justin just said, there's arguably way more media today than there even was then, as far as like romance novels. Now we have soap operas, right? And all this type of stuff too. So again, it depends on her parents filtering that media. She could arguably get swallowed up by that now just as much as she did then, as far as the type of media she consumes. Just think about all the 1 to 4 p.m. soap operas, right? She'd probably be all over those.
Yeah, but today there's also, I'm assuming here, a Reddit, a Facebook group, and God knows how many fan sites for those exact sort of things, where she would have found 20 Leons and been able to go through each of them. And sure, them relationships might have had a lifespan of about a year or so, but I mean, shit, 20 of them is 20 to 40 years.
If she makes it past the first two, because she didn't do so well then.
Yeah.
That's the thing. A lot of it was she ended up, again, in the middle of nowhere, having to deal with financial matters she never got trained for, which I will admit, still a thing today, but still, and with not only no recourse to actually get money other than selling things, but just like, if she had been here alive today, like I said, there's a ton of things she could have done, even as a housewife, and made just plenty of money on the side. Not even all that strenuous at things.
Yeah, nowadays they make romance novels a little more realistic as well, with relationships not working in the end, and high school sweethearts who don't always end up together. I feel like I don't think she probably would have liked those as much, but I feel like it could have counteracted maybe a little bit.
Now the cowboy has to go out west, right? He can't hang around too long. That's usually the
I
convention.
think she would have had more time.
Or say that again, Kirsten.
I think she would have had more time to actually grow up, because you're looking at, during that time period, people married young and died at a young age. I mean, the father was 58. That was pretty old. So you're looking at, she would have been 16, 17, basically high school age, getting married. If she was nowadays, she would be somewhere in her 20s looking at getting married. Rather than, that young. I also think she would have been more into Twilight, because every girl that age is into Twilight, almost every girl.
Do we know how old she was when she got married?
I gotta admit, at the end, I was imagining her in her 30s, maybe 40s on the outside.
Yeah, I was thinking too, because I think she made a comment that she was so much older than Leon, like maybe like a gray hair or something.
Yeah.
And that's usually around the time period when you start getting
Time period would have aged faster because they didn't have some of the things we have nowadays. And when you start looking at other literatures from that particular time period, they do state that yes, they had kids working. You started your apprenticeship at age 12, when you start learning your trade. And for a girl, you got married at a young age. Not as young as medieval times, but you would have been more, you're 16, 17, 18. If you're in your 20s, you were almost an old maid. So she would have been more towards her 20s, early 30s when she died.
Yeah, I know that it stated that Leon was like about 20 when we first met him, and there's always been the implied that she was much older than him. So, and plus, where she lived, I don't think they had that many suitors coming and knocking down the door. So, I don't know. I don't think she was a teenager when she got married. I think she was still young in her mind, but I don't think physically she was that like 16 or 17. Unless there is a time jump that we don't know about in between her getting married and them moving.
You say much older, you mean in the 40s, because 20 to 33 don't still seem too old, does it?
I think for that time period, maybe for women it is, not for men. Because if I understand, men were typically between like around 10 years difference, and it was okay. But I don't think women were, even though Charles did marry a woman who was older than him.
I just, personally older than 33, hopefully. That's all I'm getting at.
Well, let's see. I think it said she was about 16 when she came back to the farm after her mother died.
Yeah.
That was a year or two before she met Charles. And then they got married about a year after they met, so she'd have been 19. And they lived 2 or 3 years, I think, maybe 4, there in Trieste or whatever it was, before they moved to Yonville. The thing with Rodolphe was about 2 years, and then she spent half a year down after that. And then she carried on for several months with Leon, so she would have been 24, 25 by the time she killed herself.
That's my sense too, about 24, 25. Maybe late 20s at the most.
Yeah.
That would probably make Leon probably around 23-ish.
Yeah.
I don't know if it said that he was 20 or if he was in his 20s when we first meet him.
And that one I can't remember.
Yeah. I just know that there's a 3-year period in between when they say goodbye and when they met again.
Yeah.
Well, here's another question for you guys. Is literature the true antagonist of this book? Right? The fact that she is such a reader and it causes her to get so disillusioned. Right? Or is Flabeau making a comment about certain types of literature as being harmful? What do you guys think about this? What we mentioned Twilight a second ago as being kind of a modern example of this type of literature. Right? Is this Flabeau just ragging on romance literature and stuff?
Honestly, it seems like he was aiming at just about everything because, like I said, like mentioned earlier, O'May becomes at the end pretty much the villain of the story, and he reads just about everything. And it is without argument, you can say that romance novels gave her, made Emma into the woman she was, but it also, there's a whole lot of scripture and whatnot that, she references as saying this, gave me my ideas about love and whatnot. So it really looks like he's putting forth the position that, no, you don't need to read it all. Let the pastor read the Bible to you, and that's all you really need.
I don't think it helped at all. But I think she still kind of would have been that way to begin with. Or at least very, at least she could have been influenced very easily because of how she was raised. I mean, let's take away the romance books. The way she was raised was still very much sheltered. So, if she was confronted by someone who she thought was attractive, she wouldn't have understood how to handle herself. So I think she would have been more susceptible, I think that's the word, to other things. I just don't think that the romance books helped in any situation, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the culture she's in, it's almost a question of nature versus nurture, right? Was it her inner nature to do this, or was it the fact she was nurtured by culture, to think this way? Maybe a little bit of both. You guys think that modern romance novels like Twilight are corrupting our youth? What do you guys think about this? Or 50 Shades of Grey and this type of stuff? Is it corrupt?
I think there should be more of the Al Bundy type, 10 years later, after the romance shows should be out there. So you got a little more realistic view, not everything is sparkly and shiny.
I mean, there still is. That's the setup for most sitcoms these days. Well-established family, kids are in their teens and whatnot.
Yeah.
Everything from the kind of just crappy stuff, like everything Fox bought off of NBC, to the stuff that's actually well-regarded, like Modern Family. It's all just, these are well-established relationships. Like, I think the newest one in the Modern Family I mentioned was 3 or 4 years old, at the time of when they started. And then here's how they evolve and mature throughout 8, 9, 10 seasons. You see a lot of that. So honestly, I'd say they might not be the greatest thing, but there's just such you're just inundated with so much media at this point. It's almost impossible for any one of it to really, corrupt you unless you just, of your own volition, double down, triple down, and quadruple down on just this type of thing. Like, the only thing I can really say against any of them is, like, you mentioned 50 Shades of Grey, like, that is an abusive relationship, and it glorifies the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And stuff like that definitely needs dealt with. But, I mean, shit, you walk into certain churches these days, and they'll do the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like there's more representation of a successful relationship than it was. And then there are the actual romance towards it. But I also think that today's time we're more cynical of it as well because of social media, of celebrities, because we know all about their love life, basically. Like Taylor Swift, for instance. Almost everybody knows about hers, and everybody's made comments about having so many boyfriends, so many unsuccessful relationships. So I would think maybe she would learn from it because we are able to see different relationships through media and TV because, like Justin said, I mean, you see a lot of TV where it's an established family as the main characters of the story. So, I don't know. I mean, I personally like them, especially when they actually have arguments and stuff like that, because you're actually able to see it and what other people think how it should be handled.
Yeah, so I agree with you guys. The sheer amount of media we do have suggests that one thing can't corrupt to the point because of imagine her back then, right? Even access to books was limited, so just a couple of different books could have been had a profound impact on her.
And like Rebecca was just saying a moment ago, everybody, knows about Taylor Swift and this whatnot and all. I gotta admit, I don't. Anybody else actually kept up with that kind of celebrity stuff? Exactly. Like, a lot of this, it really does, they can say, oh, they're being bombarded with this and that and the other. Like, it's easy enough to just change a channel, man.
Yeah, I do agree with that. You can filter what you see and what you don't see for sure. There's so much out there. But that's definitely would be the biggest difference from then to now is just the opportunity to have and see all that. So you're right. And it kind of goes back into the whole violence and video games and early, issues with that. And really, like I said, it's on the guidance of each person or parent that allows that kind of stuff going on without explanation.
Oh yeah, that is 100% on the parents anymore because we have a rating system for that. We've had that since 94, 95. It'll say very clearly, hey, we really don't think anyone who is under 13 should play this thing. It has this, this, and this in it. Hey, 18 or older, but at the same time, you've got the same sort of people who bring kids into an R-rated movie when they're 7, 8, and 9. They don't give a shit. But then someone who needs an easy scapegoat, they say, oh, it's the video games, the violent movies, the violent music. Maybe it was just the goddamn parent not actually being there for the kid or the school system that'll beat down a kid for standing up for himself, There is honestly a goddamn quote from Socrates where he says, paper is going to corrupt the youth because it makes recording information too easy on them. It's an argument that's been going on since then, and it's been as much horse shit then as it is now.
And you got to think about Socrates. He didn't write any of those dialogues, right? It was Plato who wrote them all. So
I'm generally against anyone having sex with children, so I'm against Socrates.
Okay, fair point. Yeah, this book. Yeah, if nothing else, you guys can't say that this book didn't stir up some good conversation, right? It's, it asks a lot of the questions it provokes are still relevant to us today, right? So, however soured you might be by its ending, right? It's nonetheless a book that's going to be talked about for many centuries to come, probably. If you guys are interested, there's actually if you would take me for American literature class, there's a book in American literature that's very similar to this called The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Okay, so it's much shorter, but it's a very similar type of book about a woman disillusioned with her marriage. Not quite to the same extent. The relationship's a little different, but the rest of the structure of the book's similar. So if you're interested in reading a similar book, I would recommend that one. It's only like 120, 130 pages or so. But if you want more adultery novels, there you go. That's another good one. In the American tradition. And it's actually written by a woman, right? Kate Chopin. So it's got a little bit of a different perspective than Flabeau, right? There's a man writing a woman. You actually have a woman writing a woman in that one, which is maybe adds to the realism a bit, you might argue. What do you guys, here's a final question in class on, can men write women good? Or does it take a woman to write a woman?
I mean, that's the same as saying, hey, can a woman actually write a male character good? It just depends on how skilled they are and how up their own ass they are.
Right. It's a question. It's a question this criticism asks, right?
I'll just add that it's not every single case, but in a lot of cases, it seems like a male barber cuts my hair a little better because he has dealt with male-like hair rather than a woman. But that's not to say I haven't had women, hairstylists or whatever cut my hair really well. They have. The last one I went to did a really good job. But it just seems like when you go to the male barber, they're just used to dealing with that type of hair,
They're used to dealing with that type of cut. I wear my hair long, and I couldn't get a decent haircut at a barber no matter what I paid because they're used to. Well, they're not used to working with scissors. They're used to taking a shaver to people.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Like I say, it just depends. Like if they will actually practice and work at it, pretty much anyone can learn to write for anybody. The only question is, will they actually bother to?
I think it depends on perspective of women, because earlier on type of writings, women are very much more objectified than they are now. But I do say I would suggest maybe talking to a woman and ask her if she thinks that's more accurate. I'm not saying a man can't write a woman and a woman can't write a man. It's just, it's still nice to get that perspective. Because, Jason, if a woman was cutting your hair and she asked, another man in the room's perspective on how to do something, you're still more likely that they will do it the way that you would want to do it. You know what I mean? Just asking a person's perspective can go a long way. Because at least what we learn from history.
Yeah, it's a relevant question. It's just because I've seen a lot of feminist criticism arguing that male writers just simply don't know how to write women realistically. So it sounds like you guys are, we can, but definitely ask this and talk about it, right? I think that's a good point.
Because you usually write what you know.
Right.
And sometimes you don't know. At least with certain topics.
like that criticism, especially 20th century writers. You get writers like Hemingway and Faulkner, right? The Hemingway's especially gets that leveled against him, that he didn't know how to write women.
Well, the trick is, if you're gonna write what you don't know something, ask someone who does.
Yeah, simple as that.
Yeah. That's the problem with most of them. Back when in 1900s, 1800s especially. Oh, ask a woman? Why, God, I'd never do that. No, they don't know shit.
Hemingway probably definitely. Just a quick story. During the quarantine of 1918, Hemingway was actually holed up with both his wife and his mistress at the same time. So,
How well did that work for him?
It didn't work out too well, right? So, Google it if you want. It's an interesting story.
I mean, I've heard it working out well. The dude who originally wrote Wonder Woman, him, his wife, and their mutual girlfriend, they all lived quite well together. That's not a joke. That actually happened.
I was just saying, well, when he was saying that, I was just thinking it could have probably been pretty well at times, maybe. Maybe not sometimes.
All right, guys. So Wednesday, we're reading the short story, Yellow Wallpaper. Mackenzie, you won't have to read that day. She's already read that with me. But yeah, it's a nice short story. It'll provoke a lot of these questions that we've been asking about Madame Bovary too. Just a little bit of context. It's about a woman who is suffering through postpartum depression, right? And it ends up becoming this gothic story, right? Because she's pretty much just shut up in a room and said, deal with it, right? And it becomes this great gothic story from there. So just a little bit of context for you about that one. Remember the poem imitations? You can turn them in Friday. Friday. If you want to send me an early draft, email me a copy and I'll get back to you. So,
is that in the book? The next reading, it's in the book.
I don't think the Yellow Wallpaper is in the book. I'll probably have to give you a PDF of that. So I'll do that right after class. Put you a PDF up. Okay. It should be in the book, but it's not. Yeah, PDF I will upload for you. So look out for that. It's really short. Yeah, it'll take you 15 minutes to read, which is nice after this book. All right, so
Yeah, according to the schedule, we don't have it in the book. It says read digitally.
yeah, I'll get you a copy. I have a digital copy I can send. All right, guys. So with that said, we'll bid you adieu for the day. Just enjoy the rest of your evening.
See you guys later.
See you.